This is episode number 24 of Colorado TechCast.
I mean, I spent a number of years sitting behind the glass, responding to alarms and phishing emails and, configuring the different technologies that were supposed to, prevent, attacks from being successful. So, I mean, that time in those roles for me was really formative in kind of understanding how that job gets done and why the way we were currently doing it at the time wasn't the optimal way to do it.
Hey everybody, Trapper here. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Colorado TechCast. Colorado TechCast is a weekly podcast where I interview CEOs and founders of Colorado-based technology startups. Join me each episode as I explore the Colorado technology community from the inside out. Today, I'm joined by Cody Cornell, founder and CEO of Swimlane. Cody's an authority on cybersecurity and is responsible for the strategic direction of Swimlane. Swimlane was founded to deliver scalable and innovative security solutions to companies struggling with alert fatigue, vendor proliferation, and chronic staffing shortages. And if you're in security or you work in a SOC, you know all about these problems. Swimlane is at the forefront of a growing market for security automation and orchestration solutions that automate and organize events. So like everything from prioritizing inbound alerts to addressing real-time threats and streamlining performance across the entire operation. Cody's passion for the open exchange of security information drives him to pursue opportunities to maximize the value Swimlane's customers receive from their investments. Now let's get started. Cody, thanks for joining me on the show today.
Thanks. I really appreciate you having me on. I look forward to having a conversation.
So tell me a little bit about Swimlane and your path to starting it.
Yeah. So, I mean, just kind of at a broad level, Swimlane is what the security industry refers to as a security orchestration, automation, and response technology. That's kind of a mouthful, but what we really do is we enable organizations to be able to automate a lot of the work that typically goes into responding to security alarms. So if you think about how organizations are trying to protect their enterprise, they deployed lots and lots of threat detection and monitoring technologies. But traditionally what happens is those generate alarms, and those alarms go to individuals. And those people are generally very expensive and hard to retain and, are always looking or have new opportunities available for them. So what we've done is build an automation platform that basically automates the work that those people would typically do to make them a lot more efficient, to allow them to get a lot more work done, but also, reduce human error and solve a lot of the problems that are kind of the human element of security operations.
So alleviate some of the manual burden on actual people and inject more artificial intelligence. Is that a good synopsis?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd use the term artificial intelligence. What I'd say is it's really modeling, right? There is a series of things that you should do for any type of alarm type or any type of task, be it a phishing email or a SIM alarm or, an audit request. There's a lot of things that kind of flow into those security operators, and their job is to be able to do those and, maintain service level agreements and be able to actually get through all of the alarms, if it's, hundreds or tens of thousands of those alarms they get in a given day, and make sure that none of them hit the floor. So that, they're reducing the risk for the organization. So really what we're doing is modeling what those analysts would do for those different types of alarms, and that model allows those things to execute automatically.
So just looking at prior activity to determine, is this something that we need to route out, or is this something that we can ignore, handle internally, things like that?
Yeah, exactly. It's just, some organizations have defined process and procedure for how these things should be tackled, and other organizations are looking for, best practices in industry, examples of how they do that. We provide both. If you have an existing process, we can model to that. But on the flip side, if you're trying to build that program from scratch or haven't had the cycles in order to build those policies and procedures, there's a lot of that stuff that we make available through our product, so those customers can get up and running very quickly and very easily.
So is that where the name Swimlane comes from, is just channeling various activities?
Yes. I mean, if you think about, an organization's, different roles, different responsibilities, one of those kind of cliche things to say is, that's within my swim lane, that's within my wheelhouse. So we kind of looked at it as, responding to these alarms. We're really good at detecting things, but, historically we're not great about responding to them. And as security operators, that's really in our swim lane. That's our responsibility to do. So that, that's kind of where the name manifested from. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff that we do that's associated with process and, things being in particular swim lanes and things like that. So, I think it's a kind of a multifunctional, name in that capacity, and it stands out. It's easy to spell, and in kind of the classic startup story, we actually bought the .com, which we felt was really important, for about $117 on auction. one weekend. So, that kind of cemented the deal for us. That's really when we decided that Swimlane was the right name, when, we had kind of those three important factors of easy to spell, own the .com, and it was relatable to what we were doing.
Yeah, so you didn't spend $1 million to buy sumo.com?
Yeah, no, it didn't do that. Didn't try to go and buy a two-letter domain or anything along those lines. Obviously, having that .com is important. I know there's a lot of .ios out there and things like that, and obviously not a restraint from being successful. But on the flip side, having that .com is always nice, and for us being able to get it on auction in a timely fashion worked out really, really well.
Being able to easily spell it and say it is also as a plus for a lot of technology companies these days.
Yeah, I mean, I don't fault people that have to make up their own names. I understand the value in having a short name and having something that is, a .com that they can get, but having something that people can say and probably know how to spell, phonically very easily is nice.
Is your background in cybersecurity, or how did you get your start in the industry?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, I've been doing cybersecurity since I left the Coast Guard back in 2003. So even within the Coast Guard, I was doing work around system administration, some basic cybersecurity work. But really, when I left the Coast Guard, I was in the DC metro area and had the opportunity to work on some, great programs. And, we were talking a little bit before we got started here on, how I got started and how I got here and some of the folks that helped me get there. And, someone kind of took a leap of faith on me and put me on a program that was a, Department of Defense-wide program for patch management, vulnerability assessment, and host-based intrusion prevention across 3 different technologies. And, I was in my early 20s, but was, able to fly all over the world, learn these kind of core technologies, help other people deploy them within their environment, train them on how to use it, and really look at what it means to deploy not only technology, but policy and procedure and things like that across a really large scale. Obviously, as you talk about all the different branches of the military and all the supporting organizations that go along with that, there was a lot of exposure that I was given access to, and for me that was a real great opportunity to break into the space, but also learn kind of from the fire hose and learn a lot very, very quickly.
So have you always been entrepreneurial, or this isn't your first go-around at running a company, is it?
Yeah, no, it's not. So, I mean, kind of after doing that work within the DoD, I worked in the commercial space. I did some pen testing, and then kind of moved throughout the country to do that with different organizations, be it American Express or IBM. In 2010, decided that wanted to start, my own consulting company, and I actually did that with a gentleman by the name of Brian Kaffenbaum, who's also the co-founder of Swimlane. And, we started a consulting company, and, we took what we always were, really passionate about, which was, not only helping people select the right technology for their organization, but when we deployed it, making sure that it wasn't just a technology deployment, that we really built a program. So we staffed up the teams properly, we trained them properly, we built the policy and procedure that was associated with running those programs and really operationalized them, which is, something that, I think organizations to this day continue to struggle with, is not just buying technology, but getting it properly implemented to get the value out of it that you really, really wanted. So that's really where we specialized. And we did a lot of that around security operations. If it was SIM or data loss prevention or host-based intrusion prevention, whatever it might be, those technologies were used by the SOC. And, it was in doing that we continue to run into, situations with our customers where, they didn't have enough people to do the job. They had too much work to do. Their different technologies didn't talk to each other. And, and our traditional path to solve that problem was to go find a piece of technology that solved for that. And in doing so, we realized that what we were looking for that specifically met our needs wasn't available, so we started building it. So that's really kind of how Swimlane come to be, is we started building that technology, and in 2014 we actually spun it out into its own organization, and we did that in Phoenix, but ended up moving it to Colorado for a number of reasons, and we're excited to be here in the community that's supporting us here, and we continue to grow pretty quickly.
So why Colorado over Boston or Seattle or the Bay Area, some of the classic tech hubs? Why was it here?
Yeah, so I mean, we started Swimlane in kind of a non-traditional way. We didn't have an idea and go raise venture capital and then start building the product and then go find customers. What we did is, we had a successful consulting company that was generating profits. We took those profits and started investing them into a product. So we started building that product. We made some initial hires around software development, and then eventually around people that weren't only software developers to kind of get it off the ground, find those first customers. We did all that before raising capital. So part of that process is, how are you going to build the team? How are you going to scale the team? And where do you want to be to do that? So, we looked at, DC, Boston, Silicon Valley, Austin. We looked at a lot of different places. And, Denver seemed like a good spot for, the availability of talent, obviously with the university system that's here. The other technology organizations that have gravitated over here have provided a lot of talent. And then for us, we didn't want to be in the most expensive spot because we didn't have that venture capital at the time. So we were looking for places where our dollar would really go the farthest. And there was also people that we specifically thought would be good, organizations, maybe not individuals, but organizations we thought would be good to recruit from. So we looked at organizations that had scaled here, like Logarithm and Ping Identity and WebRoot and a number of others that have, Optiv, that have scaled here in the Denver metro area. And that provides access to some really great people that have really specific skills that, that we could apply to growing our business.
Have you found a lot of collaboration within the Colorado tech community?
Yeah, both on the security side as well as, just the general business side, there's a lot. So if you look at the security community, obviously we have great ISSA and ISACA chapters. You have organizations like SecureSet that, are doing education. Service providers like Optiv and Red Canary. You have the other technology companies, like I mentioned, WebRoot, Logarithm, Ping, that have all been great partners for us, that all have been supportive of our, endeavor to grow an organization here. And then on the business side, it's interesting, right? From the governor down, there's programs that are in place. So, we have the National Cybersecurity Center in Colorado Springs, which was, supported by the governor. I had the good fortune of going on a trade mission to support cybersecurity and, economic growth for the state. And did that with a number of other security professionals and business professionals. And then, you have programs like the Blackstone Entrepreneurship Network, which is, a program that is, supportive of a lot of the high growth, companies that are in the Denver metro and Colorado area. Obviously, the goal of the trade mission was to go to India, to find organizations that were looking to expand into the U.S. and to, show them that Colorado is a great place to, grow an organization, put down a headquarters, and really, build that brand that is Colorado for, expanding into the U.S. for companies that were in India, and vice versa. We were looking for, recipients of, Colorado services, people. The education system is producing great students. Obviously, we have lots of great companies that are exporting products and services. So it was kind of that bilateral mission of finding, organizations that were looking to come to the U.S. and telling them why Colorado is great, and vice versa, finding, organizations that could be recipients of Colorado's products and services. Coupled with that was kind of the joint mission around cybersecurity. Obviously, there's a great opportunity to collaborate, between countries, between businesses, between individuals. And, India's kind of going through an interesting inflection point where they are bringing a lot of people, hundreds of millions of people onto the internet and to online banking, and they're just going through that at a kind of a pace that's unprecedented, I think. And, sharing some of the things that we have done throughout, previous years that we wish we wouldn't have as companies, as a country even, and trying to kind of show them some of the potholes that we stepped in and hopefully help them avoid those. So yeah, it was great. We learned a lot about how they're enabling mobile banking and the security around mobile banking, because a lot of their population does their banking through their phones, which is becoming more popular here, but is super popular there, and a lot of the things that go along with that.
All right, so Cody, take me back to the early days of Swimlane in Colorado. Like, what was it like back then?
Yeah, so we've always been a fairly open to having a distributed team. So, we've had engineers that weren't in Colorado, so we had folks that were in Florida and Tennessee. But, we started hiring kind of when we relocated to Colorado in December of 2015. We'd already hired David Pack, who is our, VP of Technical Account Management right now, was one of our first kind of non-development hires that we brought in the organization. And, he was here living in the Denver area. And, we had an office in Boulder, which was about the size of a shoebox. So we had one person that was sitting there, and Dave was there some days, but a lot of times worked remotely. And, that was, the early days. We had, 5-7 people at that point. And, for us, it was about, building the product, getting it in front of potential customers, getting their feedback, and kind of iterating through that to make sure that we had a product that we felt was a good fit for a broad segment of the market. At the same time, we were running, evaluations of the product. We were continuing to scale our team. And, that was really kind of the early days. It was, everybody does a little bit of everything. The people are definitely working kind of utility functions as opposed to kind of specified roles. And, over the years that obviously has changed pretty dramatically. We're up to about 60 people now, which is about 100% more than we were about the same time last year. When you cross that, 50-person size, there's kind of an interesting inflection point where you start hiring a lot more specialized roles, a lot more specificity in the roles, be it marketing or engineering or sales or whatever it might be within the organization. You're allowed to get a lot more specific in those hires. So, for us, it's been kind of that transition throughout that period. Obviously, throughout that, we had the opportunity to raise capital to help grow that team. We did that in a little bit of a non-traditional way. One of our first customers ended up being one of our first investors, and is still probably our largest investor. So it was a really good opportunity for us to not only raise capital and grow the team, but also, someone who had licensed the product, that had made an investment in the product, understood the vision of the product, was able to come in and be a part of our board and be part of our organization. And, having that alignment and understanding of what the opportunity was without having to kind of convince somebody of that was really good for us. It allowed us to stay focused and allowed us to, obviously scale the organization.
So when you say non-traditional funding, can you talk a little bit more about that and why you chose that versus raising VC money?
Yeah, I'd say more it chose us than we chose it. I think, one of the people that I really like to follow is Jason Lemkin. One of the quotes that he has is, if you want to build enterprise software, you need 2 years and $2 million. We didn't have either of those. So kind of what we did was in non-traditional. Typically, if you're going to go out and build enterprise software, you're going to raise capital first with kind of a concept or maybe an MVP, and then you're going to take a good chunk of time to build a product, to get product market fit before you really take it to market. We started in a very different way in the fact that, we paid for the organization and all the product build out of our own pocket, and from some of our early beta customers that were willing to pay to be part of that pilot. So, for 2.5, almost 3 years, we grew the company by self-funding, so like in the traditional founder sense of taking every dollar that you have and every dollar you can afford and pouring it into the business, along with, the customers that we're paying to be part of that. So, and then at that point, we did take on some capital from that customer and that individual. That's kind of, I'd say, atypical for how enterprise software companies get started.
2 years and $2 million. I'm sure that's a daunting task. Your method of funding was probably much easier than trying to go out and raise $2 million and just let the money sit in the bank. So that's probably very wise.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know that anybody raises that money and lets it sit in the bank. I think, the interesting thing is having the money obviously makes the building out the product a lot easier, right? Having, being able to go out and hire a head of engineering and developers and QA and design and having those resources obviously allows you to build a product. But on the flip side, you have to be able to raise that cash. And, I think people that have had successful businesses and exits and things like that, raising that capital on that, inception idea phase is very doable for them because they have kind of proven execution capabilities. But we were not in that situation. I'd never built and exited an organization. I was not a known entity. It's not that we didn't try to raise capital. I someday maybe can show you a spreadsheet of the hundreds of rejections that I've gotten on trying to raise capital. And, that's part of the cycle. I mean, if you go back to 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, this product category wasn't a product category. Gartner didn't really talk about it. There was, limited to no competition in the space. There wasn't examples of, why people needed this. So it was, these few people that were out there trying to figure out how to solve this problem because they knew personally there was a problem, but it hadn't really hit economic scale. And because of that, raising capital was very difficult. And, thankfully we were able to weather that storm and we come out the other side better for it. But, there's a lot of rejection and, very, very many humbling days and trips out to Silicon Valley. And, you remember those days very well.
You've got to be prepared to hear no a lot of times, to stick it out like this. What were some of the other lessons learned along the way that when you started this, hey, this is really going to hurt, but you're going to make it through the other side better? Do you have any stories like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's, for us, it's almost the inverse. It's this, I'm almost glad that I didn't know. I mean, there's plenty of things I wish I would know. Don't get me wrong. There's a whole litany of things I wish I'd have done differently. But on the flip side, I think if we'd have been totally cognizant of the fact that we were underfunded, that, building the product would be much harder than we thought, finding people, retaining those folks, just that to go from, where we were at to where we wanted to be, if we truly understood that with the hindsight that we have now, we never would have got started. So I think that in itself is a lesson, is that, sometimes you're overly optimistic, and in our case, I think we were. But, because of that optimism, we were able to continue to move forward because we felt passionately about the problem and our ability to solve it. I think if we would have understood all of the steps along the way, there would have been kind of a paralysis by analysis that might have happened there, and where we would have realized that maybe we're out over our skis quite a bit, and that maybe we shouldn't have done it. So I think that the lesson there is, if you feel passionately enough about it and you really feel like you can actually solve for the problem and you're making progress, then keep making progress. Find that first customer, get that first hire, find the second customer, 2 turns into 10, 10 turns into 20, and you keep moving forward. And that, I think that lesson it's a hard lesson, but it's not one that you learn until you've kind of been through it. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons not to do it, but in this case, there was a big reason to do it, and it's because we knew there was a problem that needed to be solved.
So having the previous consulting experience, I'm sure it gave you a lot of insight into exactly what the customers need and what they were lacking. How did you hit on this particular product, and then how did you build the team around meeting that market need?
Yeah, I mean, consulting helped. But before that, I was a security analyst. I spent a number of years sitting behind the glass, responding to alarms and phishing emails, and doing, configuring the different technologies that were supposed to, prevent, attacks from being successful. So, that time in those roles for me was really formative in kind of understanding how that job gets done and why the way we were currently doing it at the time wasn't the optimal way to do it. So I think the consulting experience helped me kind of bridge the gap between being a technician and a salesperson, because I'm not traditionally didn't come up through the ranks as a salesperson, but was never a business development rep or an account rep. So understanding how to be a consultant to or an advisor to a potential client or customer was very beneficial for me, because that was kind of how we got our first customers, was not really coming in there and telling them about our product, but going in there and talking about what the problem was, how it could be done differently, and that potentially there are options out there that are available, which obviously led to a conversation around, what are those options, and Swimlane was one of those options at the time. So for us, that consulting experience was kind of the gap between being a practitioner and being a salesperson that I probably didn't have in spades as a skill set going into those, kind of, again, formative years.
If your company has grown 100% in the last 12 months, there's got to be a driver for that, right? Are there any industry shifts or anything pushing that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that are driving that. Obviously, as an organization, we're not only expanding, our ability to continue to build and develop our product, but also market and sell it, right? So, a lot of that growth is driven on the fact that we're bringing on more and more customers, right? So, that obviously drives the growth of our organization. I think the inverse to that is, the market. Like I said, going back to, 2015, a lot of folks that we were talking to at the time, didn't understand, how security operations automation might help them, or, why it was kind of a game changer for our industry in general. And I think in the last, 12 to 24 months, that's changed pretty dramatically, where there's become a really common understanding and theme around the fact that, there's going to continue to be a gap and a larger and larger vacancy in the number of security analysts that are available to fill these particular roles, not just security analysts, but security practitioners in general. And, along with that, as we continue to IP enable more and more things throughout the world, there's just more and more network traffic. There's more and more devices that are potentially available for compromise, and that's just more and more monitoring that, organizations need to do. So you kind of couple the fact that, the technology to solve this problem is, readily available to purchase and to license, and the fact that the problem continues to grow, the surface area continues to grow, and the talent gap continues to grow. You kind of bring those into a single equation, and that really drives a lot of growth. So, that allows, us to continue to bring our customers at a really rapid pace, which obviously requires us to scale out our team. So you kind of put those two things together, and I think that represents the fact that, or the reason, I guess, why we continue to grow at the speed that we're growing.
What do you think the future of Swimlane looks like in the next 18 months?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the space is growing very fast, and I think we're going to have to continue to grow to keep up with that. So, the nice part is that we have hit some economies of scale across our different departments. So, at points you have to scale up, your marketing team, or you have to scale up support. So we've been able to do that. So that allows us to grow a little bit more in a stabilized fashion, as opposed to kind of having to do big leaps of hiring. But we'll continue to grow very quickly. But I think the landscape in general, is changing very quickly. I think organizations have understood that, while they embrace cloud and DevOps concepts, that their security teams need to be right there in lockstep with them. And, I think technologies like Swimlane will help them continue to embrace that and move in that direction. And, I think that whole kind of transformation that's happening, from a data analytics perspective, from a cloud perspective, from a DevOps perspective, is really going to drive the adoption of security automation, because, you can't really leave one out in the cold. And, we think that people are really going to embrace that, and that's going to allow, us to continue to grow. So for us, our goal is to be able to kind of keep up with demand, as well as make sure that we continue to innovate in the space. And, the future of Swimlane will kind of reflect that in the way that we hire and structure and go to market.
How can people find out more information about Swimlane, and if you guys are a good fit for them, and how they can kind of learn more?
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of ways to find us. Swimlane.com. We talked a little bit about the domain earlier. We're on Twitter at Swimlane. You can find us on LinkedIn. You can find us on Facebook. We also have a community, we're helping organizations collaborate on security operations and response. That community is secopshub.com. So those are all places where you can go and find out more about Swimlane. I'm a pretty easy person to find on LinkedIn, and that community is, we have a community manager that's always watching that and is always available to take questions, and it's a great place for you to go and either learn more about cybersecurity or collaborate with other cybersecurity professionals if you're already in the space. So we recommend people check out both of those sites. And never hesitate to reach out. If not, you'll probably see it at a ISSA event or a SOC event or a Cloud Security Alliance event or something along those lines. Look out for the Swimlane T-shirts and stop somebody and ask a question.
That sounds great. Definitely get links to all of those sites and all of those organizations in the show notes, so make sure to check them out there. Cody, I want to thank you for joining me on Colorado TechCast today. I think you guys have an extremely interesting product, and probably the ideal time for something like this to be brought in, where you've got organizations that are already stressed to the max with the number of alerts, and just being able to put some automation inside of their data centers that automatically determines what needs action upon and who needs to do that, and policies to be followed and things like that. So do you have any final closing, Cody?
No, I really appreciate you having me on the show. And again, if there's any questions out there, please don't hesitate to reach out directly to me. We look forward to, sharing more about Swimlane. And if there's any questions you guys have, please let me know.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Colorado TechCast. Visit our website at coloradotechcast.com for episode show notes with links to all the great resources we've talked about in this episode. While you're there, click the subscribe button in iTunes so you'll never miss a new episode. I'm Trapper Little, and I'll talk to you again on the next episode of Colorado TechCast.